If you're like me, you've been building automation into your home. Now, I started with lights and plugs, and that became locks and cameras and so many other items. All the lighting in here is automated. Hopefully it comes back on. There it goes. But all of these disparate pieces of tech need to work together. Now, we don't always think about what goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. So today we're going to dig into that. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is Chris Brandt here with Sandesh Patel. Welcome to another FUTR podcast. We have with us Scott Ford, CEO and founder of Pepper, a secure full-stack IoT platform as a service that lets companies build and deliver scalable consumer IoT solutions. And there are a lot of unlikely players getting into the IoT game. So let's talk with Scott about what Pepper is, how they got started, and what it can do. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Chris. Great to be with you.
Well, thanks for coming on. Like I said, I've got everything. Like my whole studio lights here are all automated, and hopefully they all come back on. Hey, they did. Look, sometimes it works. No, but I'm a huge fan of like the IoT automation, home automation piece. So I'm very curious about like what goes into it all from behind the scenes. But before we dig into all that, why don't you tell me a little bit about Pepper, how it got started, what the founder's story is there, and what problem you were trying to solve in the market.
Pepper was founded in 2014, and very different approach to the marketplace then for us, which was a direct-to-consumer play where we'd have device manufacturers all bundled around a service, which was our platform enabling part of the product, and we sold devices through retail direct to consumers who would then go home and do it themselves and build their own systems. In that time frame, it was well before the level of market awareness we have today.
Right.
So, like a bunch of other companies in that era, we pivoted, and our pivot was to a business model that was B2B to C, which means we sell platform services to enterprises who then offer and deploy these services to their customer bases. We've completely pivoted, changed the name of the company to Pepper, and so today that's really what we do is enable third parties to launch their own private label systems into the marketplace.
So it's interesting that you went from more like the consumer market to the B2B to C side of it. I mean, what were you? Because I mean, I know that Google, Apple, everybody was sort of developing their own kind of ecosystem, but they were kind of islands of ecosystem, right? I mean, what is that? What you were seeing in the market is that you needed to break out of those islands, or what were you seeing as the big need there?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. And I'd say they're still islands or walled gardens or whatever
Definitely.
You want to kind of characterize them as. Yeah, that was a big problem and will be a problem into the future where, to kind of characterize those approaches, those are what we call captive platforms, meaning they've created the infrastructure to support the devices and their brand and their own strategic initiatives. What we are is an independent multi-tenant platform, which means we will have partners, multiple partners operating in their own kind of environment inside of our platform. What this allows for is big brands to then build and deploy their services in alignment with their strategies and business ambitions, built the way they want them built so they can serve their customer base, as opposed to the big brands that are out there that are generally in the data business, won't do a white label service. And so those companies come to us to help them, get to market with their products.
Well, and I think, one of the things I mentioned in the intro was that, there's some unusual players in this space.
Yep.
When I think of my home automation devices, I think of, like Apple and Google and Amazon and things like that. But really, you are catering to a much broader audience who is bringing a lot of automation functionality to maybe a range of products? I mean, like you mentioned before to me about, like the insurance industry and IoT around the insurance industry. Could you talk about how, like, some of these other companies that aren't in the home automation business are getting into the home automation business with a variety of products?
The promise of IoT has been around for a while. In the consumer space, which is, to kind of characterize the marketplace, you have industrial IoT, which is, train track, connected railways and oil pipelines. You have enterprise IoT, which is, call it the smart building. In both of those cases, the end user is typically an employee. Right, you're looking at a dashboard trying to manage the assets of the company you work for. In our case, the end user is an everyday consumer. Our customer happens to be the enterprise who we build these systems for, and then they're deploying to that end user. It's a very, very complex set of considerations to deliver to large scale consumers in that way, right? You have all kinds of things that you have to consider, from cybersecurity protection, identity management. You're going to have dozens of devices in a single account. And so because of that, it's really, really complex. So consumer IoT has not really manifested in the same time frame as the other one. So it's the newest part of the IoT market. So we come on the scene and help industrial partners finally capture the value of IoT. And there's strategic value and there's economic value. When you think about, and you brought up the insurance industry, we just acquired a company who's squarely in InsurTech IoT, which means devices in consumers' homes that are built and designed to give users and their insurance companies early warning in advance of a potential claim. So water is a big, the largest claim in the insurance industry. Simple, moisture detectors around your home can save, from an insurance carrier perspective, billions of dollars worth of claims. So that's a big market that's coming out there. And there's a variety of other industrial verticals that want to get in to IoT with different use cases.
So when we talk about the consumer IoT services market, like how big of a market are we talking about? I mean, I got to imagine that's a, pretty big TAM.
The total market is, you see different projections out there, but the kind of midpoint's about $30 billion in just the United States and just services. So it doesn't have hardware revenues in there. So $30 billion of services revenue will be generated in 2025. We're not far from that at this point, but it is a massive market. I'd say about 60% of that is spoken for, meaning you've got AWS and the Nest and the Rings and the others that play there. So there's 40% of that $30 billion market that's accessible. And that's really what we're going after.
You mentioned some of those other big players. I mean, what do you see as the future of this market? Like how do you think it's going to shape up here? Are these big players going to open the platform up to include other things, or is that just they always going to continue on as a walled garden and like companies like yours that are going to continue to bring broader value around these things?
The most idealistic vision of the future is that all devices work together and live together and harmonize together. We're never going to get there. The reason is there's too many, call it business model conflicts, right, that exist in the marketplace. So you named a couple of them who have their own platforms, call it the Nest and the Apple HomeKit and Ring and everything else. They're building their systems based on their own strategic intent. Largely, those big companies are data companies, so they really want to extract data and use it for to drive their own business. When you think about an insurance carrier, that big company is not going to share their data with the insurance carrier, and the insurance carrier, the only reason they do this is for the data, right? To better underwrite their policies and reduce claims and those kinds of things. So I don't think we'll see kind of this nirvana state where all of these things are blended together and everybody's happy. I think there's just too many business conflicts inside of that to get there. So I think what we're trying to do is be the closest thing to it, right? Having a platform that has, hundreds of devices integrated into it. So, you can address 80% of devices in market with a platform approach like ours.
Tell me a little bit about how Pepper works, right? I know you're a cloud-based SaaS provider or PaaS provider.
Yeah.
You go down to the sort of firmware level of some of these devices. I mean, you're in the RF side of the house, but then you're all the way in the IP side of the house, and cloud-based platform side of the house. So tell me about how it all works.
We characterize Pepper as being a full stack, full service platform. Okay. We're not in the hardware business, right? Unlike some of the other groups that you've talked about. And we want to remain independent of hardware just because of the overhead and supply chain considerations. But we do work very closely with hardware, obviously. So what our team does is they write firmware for the devices. And that firmware then secures the device, and then it governs all of the data communications from that device through our cloud infrastructure to the interfaces that we also create. So we have a underlying architecture for user experience. We then design for enterprise partners that allow them to align the service in the way they want to and with their brand and all of that kind of stuff. So it's everybody has a different definition of full stack. That's ours.
You bring sort of an agnostic perspective to this whole thing. You're not making the hardware, so you can talk to a lot of different companies. And I know that that makes it difficult because there's certain proprietary functionality that these companies kind of wall off from their platforms. But on the other hand, I think you have the opportunity to bring new functionality to some of these things as well.
It's really necessary as an independent platform to have an exponential number of services, capabilities, and features, right? Because we want to be able to serve our clientele the way we need to. As opposed to the captive platforms who are only going to build what they need, right? And so we have, 250 different microservices built into our infrastructure and a lot of, things that you wouldn't dream of having in a captive approach. So we built that, and that allows us to rapidly add devices, rapidly add other services, and also integrate big brand devices from a cloud-to-cloud perspective. So brands matter in this space, and we want to make sure, the consumer can go get their Ecobee, thermostat, and it works with their camera or whatever they buy in retail.
One of the challenges that we see talked about a lot with home automation is the idea of security. Where is this data going to, and how secure are these IoT devices, and are they getting hacked? And because we see in all those cameras that just are all over the in the public sphere there, right? But you guys actually bring enterprise grade cybersecurity to this too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The consumer IoT market is still the Wild West out there. I mean, it's a brand that like a Nest or a Ring or, Philips Hue or some of these other big brands in the marketplace. You should have no worry about their focus on cybersecurity protection. The problem is those big brands represent probably 30% of the shelf space in retail. The other 70% are from brands you may not have heard of before. And there's a really good chance that those devices are operating on foreign owned platforms. And so a lot of people think that cybersecurity is really about the device or endpoint, and it sure is. You need to make sure that that's locked down. But if you're the owner of the platform and you have, ill intent with this data, you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter how secure the endpoint is. So what we do is we, have fortified our platform both at the, core of our platform or network, but also all the way out to the interfaces and the devices. So everything's encrypted as it traverses through our platform system. Very different than kind of the typical approach, which is, hurry up and get your device on there. Let's throw an app together real quick and, allow it to move through mass market. That whole world, was really prominent in the early days. It's starting to reconcile in the right way now. And I'd like to think that we're part of that change.
So Scott, from a normal homeowner's perspective, that might not understand technology and what even IoT even really is, what's like an example of when a homeowner would be like, oh, that's what IoT is, and kind of get that light bulb moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think and we run into this all the time. So there's like this very elementary description for, my grandma who says, "What do you do for a living? I don't get it." It's, I walk her out to the front door and say, "Hey, see this doorbell with a camera on it? We're everything that from that camera to your phone that you can access." So people are becoming increasingly familiar with, video doorbells, cameras, in your home, connected thermostats, and things like that. So those examples typically resonate to kind of the unaware, and then you have different degrees of sophistication as you talk about, the more technical side of things.
Right now, with this studio equipment and everything that we got going on, the automation of it is a necessary, because I don't know how we do without it, Chris.
I've gotten so lazy about everything. I just because hitting one button and turning all the lights on at once that you need is just so nice. And I've got things just wired up so I can see who's coming to the doorbell. I can see, when people come into the backyard. I actually don't ever have to leave my basement, which is maybe a bad thing. But there's a lot of different kind of market verticals for this, and I know you've done like a lot of really interesting things, and I know one of the other things that's really cool about the way you're doing it is because you're applying firmware to all these devices. So the more things you get into, like every time you take on a new project, I got to imagine it sort of builds the whole ecosystem a bit, right? So that's got to be nice. But tell me a little bit about like kind of the market verticals you're in and where you guys are playing.
So we're in the consumer electronics vertical. So think about the enterprises that play in that space, which are manufacturers of devices, distributors or brands that are attached to devices that go into market. Retailers are increasingly looking at private label IoT, as they do with private label soup and everything else. And so you need a platform to be able to do that. So that's sort of the standard consumer electronics ecosystem. We also serve service providers. We talked about the insurance use case where you have devices that are there to detect, some sort of peril, right? Whether it's fire, water, or something else that, is helpful to the insurance business model and the consumers protecting their own assets. Inside of service providers are also utilities. Right. So utilities want to create managed kind of energy solutions for consumers. They also want to develop a stronger relationship with their consumer through a branded app where they can communicate things and have consumers manage their energy. Wireless carriers and others. So there's a long list of service providers that either have tried or have ambitions to get in this market that we will serve. And then there's call it consumer brands that may or may not be in the consumer electronics space today. So an example I'll use is we've talked to a toy company who wants to create the connected nursery. So think connected bassinets, and there's a company named Owlet out there that has connected devices on the baby's foot, so you can manage their vital signs and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of these just basic brand industries that you wouldn't even consider would be in IoT, but there's a ton of movement there because it brings so much productivity and new revenue streams to everyday companies that we're a really good partner for that set of enterprises.
Every day I feel like there's another new device that does something else, and you wouldn't I wouldn't have thought about it. I mean, because there's coffee pots, and you could have a Nescafe, IoT app that makes the perfect cup of coffee for you, I would imagine, something like that.
Yeah.
But I've seen, I was just looking at a company today that's trying to solve water issues, like water use issues by intelligent shower heads and intelligent water use devices that is sending telemetry all over the place. And I got to imagine that even like, a municipality would be interested in, some of this IoT kind of data as well, right?
So you're moving a little bit out of consumer when you talk about,
right,
municipalities, but there is a lot of IoT in place today. Think of connected energy meters, right, and things like that, gas lines and other things. That you see the truck kind of drive through your neighborhood and collecting all the signals for, a future bill to go to the house. So that's been in place for a while, but you're exactly right. These things are going to merge at some point, because that data that's created through these intelligent devices is interesting to a lot of players in the marketplace. So I do see this whole ecosystem moving from a hardware oriented kind of focus to a services-oriented focus, and that's really where we thrive. Hardware or endpoints are necessary to create the data, but it's the magic is really the services you create and the data that's generated by those services that you create. And so collecting that and creating analytics and other things that are useful to third parties is a big part of what we do.
I could see, like wrapping this around like certain affinity groups too, like, hey, I'd like to do yoga. You could have like a branded app that like integrates with, setting the lights to the right spot and, like managing your music and the various devices and connecting to the proper lesson and managing all that for you. I mean, there's so many interesting ways to spin what you do. And I got to imagine a lot of people with, the right kind of creativity could build a whole business around abstracted IoT devices, but, from a platform that's adding value around it.
And I think you're exactly right. This whole movement is going to spawn, a lot of creative entrepreneurs who are going to create kind of vertical or event-oriented IoT services. So your yoga studio is a good one. I mean, there's certainly, I haven't thought about this specifically, but there's certainly a package that you could create and sell to, 20,000 yoga studios around the country that automates what happens inside of their studios. So that's absolutely going to happen. Today they do a little bit of that, but it's fragmented. It's app overload. There's just too many things that you have to be aware of and manage, so you don't really get to take full advantage of what technology brings if you're in that kind of a fragmented environment.
My sister has a flotation tank business, like get in and, like decompress and float. But it was very complex for her to build it out because you have temperature sensors in there that, sort of, you have to set the air temperature to a very specific temperature. You have to set the water temperature to a very specific temperature to get that sort of, you're floating in a void feeling. But then in addition to that, there's all the lights, ambient lights and various lighting programs. There's different music options or no music at all. But, like you could have like a light therapy session. You could have a guided meditation and light therapy kind of session. And it was really, really difficult to put together because there's nothing that existed to make that work when she went to do it. I mean, it sounds like now there is an option. I got to go tell her.
It's still a really nascent environment that we operate in. And so, just given where we are in the market, we really focus on big enterprises, right? You kind of need the scale here to be able to create the use cases that we're talking about. But no question, and a big, sort of no-brainer important part of what you just described is timers, right? And so if you've got a guy, floating in one of those pools, you certainly want it to end in 20 minutes and the temperature to go down and all that kind of stuff. So there's really basic things that can be achieved here that you wouldn't otherwise think about.
I think there's more automation in our lives than we even think about. And it makes me think, where do you stop and where does the rest of it start? Like I've got so much IoT in my car that's integrated with, my garage door and, in some regards it's integrated with my home. And I've got things on my phone, apps and stuff like that. I know you're kind of focused on the home automation market, but do you see like a future in sort of expanding that out?
Yeah, we're working on a connected car capability right now.
Cool.
Partly for the interest of insurance carriers who can now have driving behavior with their residential types of services, but also consumers who want to know when they need to take their car in or whatever. So there's both devices and standalone apps that can solve those use cases. You've got all these apps and all these services. Obsolescence is a big issue here too, right?
Yes.
And so, you've been using for 3 years now your rules that you might have, IFTT, if this and that, kind of, managing all these rules. Well, these devices, a lot of them, it's several years, but they're perishable, right? They get to an end of life point where at some point somebody is not going to service that device because it's already been replaced 5 times by newer units. The benefit of working with us is that we maintain all of that, and we help with end of life solutions and provide firmware updates and all the things like that, so you can keep your sort of routine in place. And at the right time, our partners can reach out to you and say, hey, you've got an end of life camera. Can we send you a new one and upgrade your services to look like that, which is a business benefit as well.
Google Nest, for example. Nest has been sunsetted. I don't know if I'm sure you're aware of that, but all their new products do not work with the Nest platform. They now only work with Google Home. Google Home doesn't necessarily work with everything else. I have a problem where I have a G Suite account, and the email from a G Suite account cannot be used in a Google Home environment, which I don't understand. I still don't understand that. But I mean, I had so much trouble, getting that migrated over and making it work and do that. It would have been nice to have something that just, kind of takes care of that for me.
Right.
There's an incentive for a lot of these big companies to sort of, obsolete products.
Yeah.
That produces tremendous amount of e-waste and just sort of inefficiency. But, a lot of these devices continue to work for a very long time, even though they just, these companies no longer want to or have the wherewithal to support them. So I do like that, sort of obsolescence protection you're giving.
You're always going to have some level of it. I mean, think about how we used to charge our first iPhone and all of the variations of the accessories that work and now don't work with even products like that. So that's a factor in this world as well. So there's a lot of things that, over time don't make as much sense to support when you have new technologies to replace it.
I definitely get that, but I'm glad to see that there's another option to maybe squeeze a little bit more juice out of some of these things.
I'm just curious, from your perspective, what is the next transformative wave coming in the world of IoT that gets you personally just excited about,
5G?
That gets your intellectual curiosity going?
I think that there's... this is for another podcast, but I think AI and ChatGPT type of integrations are mind blowing, right? If you think what's possible there, so that's certainly something that's going to be integrated into this universe. Frankly, I think this idea of enabling big companies to get into the market and design their own sort of signature inside of consumer IoT, that gets me juiced, right? Because, you've got creative people who've been doing a lot of interesting things with non-connected brands, now thinking about how to take that same creativity and produce things that will, go to, consumers that we'll see in stores and go, oh my God, I never knew that anybody connects this thing, and wow, that makes sense. So we see that every day, and it feels like it's never going to end. And it's really, really cool, because I think it's really transformative as we get into some of these things.
That's sort of the future of the whole space. But what specifically do you see as like the next big thing for Pepper? What are you guys focused on that you can talk about?
Certainly, insurance is a big focus of ours. State Farm announced a $1.2 billion investment in ADT. So ADT is a security company, with a legacy platform and 6 million customers or whatever it is. And so on the surface, that looks like a really interesting partnership where an insurance carrier can leverage the data from 6 million households that have been around a while. That's a very interesting thing for two massive companies to try to figure out. I think what we bring is, the nimbleness that's required to enable every other insurance carrier to get in the market and do the things that they want to do. From a high level, tech perspective, my mind is blown every day by devices that I thought would never be connected that are connected, right? The connected toaster, right? I mean, it takes me a while to get my head around that as a use case, right? But they're sold today. The connected crock pot, things like that are out there. Now, the thing that really excites me, which fits into our business model, is the services that can be created. And so again, back to the devices where hardware was really the centerpiece of consumer IoT in the past to now services, that's really starting to manifest into ideas like we support a line of pet feeders. So the dog dishes with a little camera on it, and you can talk to your dog and shoot them treats and all that kind of stuff. Well,
we have a Furbo too.
Well, if you have that device in there and you think about the services that you can create and then monetize, it takes you a second to kind of prime your thinking pump there. But once you do, it's like, man, I can sell that guy pet insurance. I could, sell a subscription to dog food. I can do all these other things that are related and very service oriented to that use case. So, the crock pot recipes for the connected crock pot, those types of things. We really, that's the kind of future of our business, because this is an ecosystem where you have to have the right level of monetization to be able to support a business case that says we have to support all these devices for the effective life of these devices.
It's funny. I was talking to somebody earlier today about the whole pet tech industry. High tech stuff is coming to the pet industry. So
no question. Yeah.
I can only imagine the kinds of things that people are going to create with a platform like this. I think that's what's cool about this, is that it's really a platform that can enable a lot of really creative products.
Most of the management team here came from the telecommunications industry, the wireless industry, where once you started deploying these higher speed data networks, you're able to create an infinite number of products and use cases inside of that. So that's where our experience comes from. And, think about all the things you couldn't do on your first wireless phone that you can do on your smartphone today. What it required, though, was a really robust, secure, regulated platform, because there's so much data and sensitive information that traverses these networks. The same dynamic is here. Before you kind of go around and innovate everything and all these use cases, you really have to have a robust core that can support those things.
Yeah.
And we've developed the core platform, but the innovation is just really occurring now. And I think you're right. There's gonna be a world where people can create their own systems, right? Whether they're a brand or an everyday consumer. So there's going to be a lot that changes over time, but it does start with a really high security protected U.S. based. So there's a lot of foreign platforms in the marketplace that people can trust and then ultimately innovate on.
I think it all is super cool. And, I just want to say thanks so much for coming on and telling us about Pepper, because it's got to be hard to live, sort of in the background doing all the work, but not getting any of the recognition, right? But, so here we are giving you a little bit of that recognition. Thanks so much for coming on. It's really cool. I can't wait to see the kinds of things that get built with this. It's sort of a whole wide open field here. So
yeah, and it's moving fast too. So look forward to our next call, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of updates.
Well, head over to the Pepper website. I'll put a link to get started on building your brand new IoT services business.
There you go. There you go.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Sandesh.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you could, please, please, please hit that subscribe button, because that really does help us out so much. And while you're there, click on that like button as well. And I will see you in the next one.